Hey guys, Oslo here, and today we're back from a YouTube video. I'm making a video today that I haven't really, made in a while, in this sort of sense, just talking about a bunch of matchups that I like, or dislike. I guess I've kind of done that as well. This will have the same premise as the JoJo and Hellsing video, where I just go over all the MUs of the most notable characters in the series. So firstly that I never run out, but also just so I get a chance to talk about them. The one difference that this video will have to those series is that I won't limit, videos I've already done before to these videos, because in the JoJo video, for example, I wasn't allowing myself to use any MU that I've already covered in a video, and to be honest, I can't be bothered following that rule here. So I'm just going to talk about the ones that I've already went over, if they're the best ones in my opinion. So if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like, subscribe, and let's just get into it. The first MU I've got here is definitely one that's not really well known. It is Tanjiro Kamado versus Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. Now, Tanjiro has a lot of good matchups. I mean, you've got Jonathan Joestar, Edward Elric, that one guy's name I can just never pronounce, but this is probably my favourite due to my personal connections to both characters. The connections are as such, right? They're both male main anime protagonists who had their entire family slaughtered by an inhuman species while they were out collecting something as if it was an ordinary day. The inhuman species, demons and titans, seek to wipe out humanity and can regenerate unless their head is cut off. Upon having their families destroyed, they both pledge to wipe out every single titan or demon / Nezuko, or besides Nezuko I suppose, and they are accompanied by a dark-haired powerful girl and a coward blonde guy who ends up overcoming his cowardice across the series. Both join ranks specifically catered to killing titans and demons, the Demon Slayer Corps and the Scouts. Both characters are put on trial due to their relations to demons and titans, and are both attempted to be executed, however are saved last minute by an elderly figure who has authority, over everyone else despite not really being a fighter. Both end up becoming the very things that they swore to destroy and succeed in wiping them out this way, however parallel in their endings, which, by the way, spoilers for Attack on Titan. Tanjiro became a demon, however, was able to overcome it and wipe out the demons for good. It ends up with a sort of happily ever after ending, being able to start a family and all that. Meanwhile, Eren Yeager becomes the villain and ends up getting, or killing most of his close friends, and having his closest friend ended up killing him, which would then take out the Titans for good. Which I guess is another, bittersweet ending. They can also both, regenerate. They've got some level of precognition, and are very naive, as Eren is very headstrong and Tanjiro is just naive. They're also both swordsmen who struggled with their weapons at first, and also have powers related to their ancestors. It can also be a really debatable fight, depending what you take as well, so yeah, this is just why it's my favourite. Going on to the next MU, we have Nezuko Kamado versus Alphonse from Full Metal Alchemist. They're fan-favourite sibling protagonists from their respective worlds. They hold an innocent nature despite being seen as imposing or threatening, mainly due to their new body they've been transferred into. They use their powers to help their older brother on their adventures, and at the same time, despite the fact that they aren't that threatening, there's the ever-present concern that both of them lose what they have left. Both of them just giving in to their power basically. It just vibes a lot as well. I think it's very good. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'll cover it at some point. I've heard it's a stomp, but I'll see. Next, I have Inosuke versus Raphael from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're two male heroes who use blades to fight and have extreme anger issues. They both have animal themes basically, despite being very humanoid, and they often threaten the ones close to them without actually meaning it. It really just vibes a lot, to be honest with you. Next is Zenitsu versus Tokotodo, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, from Chivalry of a Failed Knight. Blonde swordsmen who belonged in a group of fellow swordsmen. Their main events revolve around lightning, and both have a big, massive, finishing move. The big key to their power resolves around them being hindered in some way, Zenitsu being asleep and, Toka with her glasses off or something. I think it's a very good MU. It's better than Zenitsu versus Kaminari for sure. Also, something I forgot to mention in the intro, shout out to Banana, this person who managed to help me out with some of the more obscure characters getting MUs for, because I was kind of struggling with a few of them, but Moving on to the next one, we have Kanao versus Ashi from Samurai Jack. Two girls who lived normal lives, who live in a world full of swordsmen who fight monsters. Both suffered for abuse like they didn't really deserve, and were eventually saved by someone and resulting in them wanting to fight monsters. Despite this, they didn't really act themselves until they met the male main character, who came along and told them to be themselves and make their own choices. They took this advice and ended up falling in love with the main character, sacrificing themselves to save the boy they loved. Definitely a very good MU in my opinion. I think it's debatable as well, probably. Next is Genya versus Finral from Black Clover. They are considered like dark horses of their respective groups. Both appear to be like unlikable allies, but behind their rough personalities lie their insecurities. Rejected due to their brothers, they both seek to prove their doubters wrong by following in unconventional paths. Next is Yoriichi versus Kenshin Himura from Ronin Kenshin. They are two samurai who are kind-hearted and live with marks on their face. They both fight to protect others and use their blades when they truly need to. Both live in an era where the samurai was prevalent, and both of their lives have been filled with turmoil, and both have an appreciation for human life and vow to protect it. I mean, I've probably just described like a ton of matchups there, but I think it vibes a lot there as well. Next, we have Giyu versus Welzepoli from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. They are male anime mentors to the main character, who share connections with each other, being Tanjiro and Jonathan. They are the first characters that the protagonists run into that display powers, besides like demons, I guess, and Dio. And afterwards, the protagonist trains to get the same powers as Will and Giyu, albeit to a lesser extent. It vibes, Next is Rengoku versus either Sir Nighthigh or Kite from Hunter x Hunter. Basically, the premise is that there are three male anime mentors who were introduced in the same arc that they died in, where they sacrifice themselves for their main character in order to save them from an unexpectedly powerful main villain, who the main character then later on go on to avenge with an entirely new overpowered power, with Deku having 100%, Gon becoming adult Gon, and Tanjiro having, sun breathing. Although, I didn't really like Togata at first for Rengoku. It's definitely grown on me, but it's the best for Togata in my opinion. Next is Senmei versus We See Immaculate from Final Fantasy. They're angry, white-haired swordsmen. There's probably more to it, but it vibes. Next is Obanai versus Mitsuki from Boruto. They are male main characters who are on the side of good and have powers related to snakes, and they use snakes in their fights. They also have a very close family member who are related to, that are basically villains. It vibes, but it's definitely a stomp. Next is Shinobu Kocho versus Hornet from Hollow Knight. They're quiet bug girls who specialise in a form of attack that's far different from what's viewed as normal in their world, with traps and poison. When they go for their traditional form of attack, they're much lighter and much more floaty. Their enemies that they fight are basically zombies, being the infected and demons. They both use flight as a form of attack and have a high position and power, Hornet being a princess and Shinobu being a Hashira. They witness the death of a loved one, and they both cover their grief with a mask. Metaphorically, at least. They both ultimately die due to the people who they have long-standing connections with, but both play an integral role of defeating said enemy. Next is Tengen versus Dosu from Naruto Shippuden. They're two male shinobi who use sound-based attacks and are part of teams that have other similar powers. It vibes, and it also gets kind of contrasts with Tengen being a really important character, while Dosu's an extremely minor one, but it works. Next is a really funny one. It's Michiro versus Guar from Hololive. I saw this online, and they're basically just children that are associated with the color blue. There was very little connections, but I think it was really funny. Next is Mitsuri versus Boa Hancock from One Piece. It's like love or something. Next is Gyome versus Toph from Avatar The Last Airbender. They are blind rock masters that are known for being possibly the strongest in their respective teams, and despite the fact that they are blind, they are incredibly powerful. Toph has a lot of good matchups, right? But they're all pretty much stomps and, the other characters' favour, to my knowledge at least. So this is probably the most debatable one out of all of them, which is quite cool at least. Next is Muzan Kubisuji versus Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. They're two male main villains from their respective series who are both monsters with regenerating powers that can be killed by the sun. Both can turn humans into monsters and have insane charisma, and yet are perfectionists. They can control minds of those who turn into monsters, and they both eat humans and are very heavily linked to the main character through murdering their family. Next, we're going into the more obscure characters. We have Kyogai versus Exploud from Pokemon. They're sound-attacking monsters. Next is Susamaru versus Typhon from RE0. They're two minor villains who have the personality and appearances of a child. There wasn't much for Susamaru. Next is Yahaba versus Bishu from Chivalry of a Failed Knight. They're both the first members of their series' respective bad groups who fight a main character. Like, again, is very paper thin, but you know, it's something. Next is the Swamp Demon versus Jan Valentine from Hellsing. They are regenerating asshole monsters who think they're the bomb, despite being introduced at the start of the series and immediately dying. I think it vibes a lot as well. I think it's a debatable fight, although Swamp Demons probably stomp. Next is the Hand Demon versus Diki from Dorodoro. One of the first demons of the main character Slay, who are basically big green blobs who will eat any human they find. They also contrast with the Hand Demon being relatively self-conscious, while Diki is much more feral. Next is the Spider Demon Father versus Sloth from Full Metal Alchemist. They're muscular humanoid monsters relying on their toughness and strength to beat their opponents, and are shockingly fast for their size. They also serve specific roles in their respective grips as the main villain's, as the main villain's guardian to some extent. Next is the Spider Demon Mother versus Muffet from Undertale. They're spider, monster females who fight the main character, and in the genocide route, for Undertale at least, they both end up dying in a very sympathetic light despite trying to kill the main characters. Next is the Spider Demon Brother versus Nyx Parthe from Sephiroth of the End. They're prideful members of the grip-like species who can turn humans into said species. It's something. Next is the Demon Spider Sister versus Kisikyo from Sephiroth of the End. Their demons use some sort of encasement to defeat their enemies. It's kind of oddly specific, but I think it works. Next we're getting on to the Upper Moons. We have Kaigaku versus Yun Gui Nam from All of Us Are Dead, ? They are two cowardly psychopaths who torment others for their own gain and have personal connections to the main heroes with different circumstances, and they hope to get their new goals by killing the main heroes. Both die in fate that was coming, and they change it. It works, yeah. Next is Dake versus Black Maria from One Piece. They are two villains inspired by Japanese Orion who captivate anyone who lays eyes on them and have a sadistic personality despite that. They both have dark overlord masters that find great comfort in obeying them. Next is Gyatro versus Quicksilver from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They were basically both young, when they were young they were judged for their looks. They both had a sister who would always protect. They both almost died, but then met a powerful guy which gave them the option to join them or to die, and they both accepted. Due to the powers they were given to them, they ended up with some of the most powerful powers in the world. But even with that incredible power, they used it for, something you might not have expected, which was to protect their sisters of all things. They're both considered monsters, and both fought one last person that had a similar story to them, and sadly died seeing their sister go away from them. It surprisingly is thematic. It's a very good one as well. It's very debatable depending on what you take for Quicksilver as well. Next we have Yuko versus Daphne from RE0. They're two messed up in the head individuals who create abominations and also belong in big groups of evil despite their respective worlds, or in their respective worlds at least. Next is Nakimi versus Kaiwenji from Dynasty Warriors. They're string-playing subordinates of the antagonistic masters. They contrast with Kai being in a stable marriage, while Nakimi was in an awful one which resulted in her killing her husband. Next is Hantengu versus Twin Rover from The Legend of Zelda. They split off into multiple versions and then come back to combine into a more powerful entity. I didn't really have much for Hantengu. Next is Akaza versus Wamu from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. They are two grey male main villains. They are very strong and yet terrified of their leader's power despite being of the same race as them. They both have a fighting code despite their nurture and seek a worthy opponent. They both kill a major character only to be avenged later on by the main character. They also both fight characters who use breathing powers. Next is Doma versus Shu from Tokyo Ghoul. They are two villains of anime who obsess over a hero. They're part of a powerful group. They seem kind at first, but really cruel in nature and disliked by their own kind. There's probably more to it than that, but there's just really vibes already. Next, for a Kokoshibo matchup, there are two matchups that I really like. One's a JoJo one though, so if you don't like the oversaturation of JoJo versus, Demon Slayer, then you can ignore it, so I'll include both. Basically, the first one is Kokushibo versus Alexander Anderson from Hellsing. They are two anime characters who are swordsmen, who, are leaders of groups that hunt monsters, and then later on became the very monsters they were hunting in order to gain more power. The JoJo matchup for this one is Straightzo. It's basically the same thing, being a part of a group, hunting monsters, but eventually end up becoming monsters for more power. However, the added connections here is that they use breathing powers that are similar in Demon Slayer and JoJo, and also they're only weaker than people who are at the top of their race. Kokushibo's only weaker than Muzan, and Straightzo's only weaker than Dio, for example. Next is Enmu versus Chocolata from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. They're two minor villains who work under the main villain, and they love violence a little too much. They also have, at least Enmu fusing into the trade kind of gave me vibes of Chocolata's powers, even if, Chocolata does stomp. Next is Rui versus Eveline from Resident Evil. They are two kids who are genetically modified and wanted a family before coming across a forest area with a worn down house. They both make some people their quote-unquote family by infecting them with their own DNA, which as a result made their new family have powers and a new look. Both fight a young guy and capture their loved one in order to make them a part of their family, but end up dying tragically. Next is Urodake versus Tonpetty from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. They are mentors to the mentors of the main characters of Jonathan and Tanjiro. They're old. It works. They have the same powers, stuff like that. Next is Jiguro Kuwajama versus Master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda. They are two male old mentors from animated series who train up a collection of warriors, however only seemingly made the incompetent one their star pupil. Both of their strongest students become evil and they willingly accepted death. This would be one of my favourite matchups if, Jiguro had any feats whatsoever. Because they're kind of featless, we don't, really know how the fight would go down. Next we have an extreme stomp, but one with connections, funnily enough. It's Sabito versus Son Goku from Dragon Ball Z, specifically in the Cell games. There are two male anime characters who are very skilled fighters, yet despite that died against fighting a big green monster trying to save everybody else. They both come back as a ghost of sorts in order to help another male main character gain the power required in order to avenge them and defeat the big green monster that killed them and so many other people. The fact that this is unironically thematic is really funny, considering the fact I unironically used Goku here, but we move on. And finally, Makomo versus the ghostly Marowak from Pokemon. They're female ghosts who died a long time ago to a minor villain who's tied to, the big bad main villain working under them. And that was the video. If there were any Demon Slayer characters I missed, then I'll jump off a bridge, and I'll see you all in the next video.